We're going to explore how to style text, like changing colors, font sizes, and more, to make your content stand out beautifully. And then we'll get into background styling, adding colors, images, and creative designs that bring your web pages to life. Hey everyone, welcome back to our CSS journey. This is part 2. Today's agenda is simple and exciting. By the end of this lesson, you'll know how to make your websites look clean, colorful, and professional. So let's get started and level up your CSS skills. Have you ever wondered how to perfectly center your content on a web page? Like headings, paragraphs, or even buttons? Well, it's actually super simple. With just a small CSS trick, you can align everything neatly in the center, making your design look clean and balanced. Here you can see how the same content transforms from left aligned to perfectly centered. Whether it's a heading, paragraph, or button, centering makes your UI look more professional and visually appealing. Let's learn how to do that step by step. Now let's understand the basics of CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it works using something called rule sets. Think of a rule set as a simple instruction. It starts with a selector, which tells which element you want to style. Then inside the curly brackets, you define properties and their values. For example, color, size, spacing, everything is controlled here. So basically, CSS is just a list of rules that tell your web page how to look. Simple, right? Let's apply what we just learned. Here, we're using a CSS rule set to center content. First, we select the element using a class, in this case hCenter. Then, we use a property called textAlign and set its value to center. That's it. With just one line of CSS, your text moves right into the center. This is one of the easiest and most useful tricks in CSS, and you'll use it a lot. Now let's bring everything together. On one side we have HTML, which creates the structure of your web page. And on the other side we have CSS, which adds style and design. Here the HTML defines a heading, like tourism, and the CSS applies styling, like centering the text. When you combine both, you get a complete, beautiful web page. So remember, HTML builds the structure, and CSS makes it look amazing. Alright, let's do a quick and powerful recap of HTML attributes. In HTML, attributes are used to give extra information about an element. Here's the simple syntax. Tag attribute equals to value, easy, right? Now let's break it down. The attribute name tells what kind of property you are setting. For example, color, link, image source, and more. The attribute value tells the actual information or setting, like the exact link, color, or text you want to apply. So think of it like this. Attribute name is the label, and value is the data you give to it. Once you understand this, you can control how elements behave and display on your web page. Simple, powerful, and super important. Let's understand how HTML and CSS work together. Think of HTML as the structure, like the skeleton of a web page, and CSS as the design, making everything look beautiful and stylish. Here we have an HTML attribute called class. This class is like a name tag you give to an element. For example, main heading. This becomes the attribute value. Now what happens? CSS uses this class name to apply styles. So basically, HTML says, hey, this is my class name. And CSS says, got it, I'll style everything with that name. Simple, right? That's how HTML and CSS connect and work together. Now let's go a little deeper. Here we are using a div element, which acts like a container. Inside this div we assign a class, hCenter. Let's break it down. Class is the attribute name, and hCenter is the attribute value. So what does this mean? We are telling the browser, hey, this container belongs to the class called hCenter. And later in CSS, we can use this class name to apply styles. So remember, HTML assigns the class, and CSS uses that class to style things beautifully. Let's see a real example in action. Here we have a simple HTML structure, a div with the class hCenter. Inside it, we have a heading, a paragraph, and a button. Now here's the magic. Using CSS, we can center everything horizontally. That means all the content, the title, text, and button, will appear nicely aligned in the center. And look at the result on the right side, clean, balanced, and visually appealing. So just by using a class, we can control layout and alignment easily. That's the power of CSS. Ready to make your website? Today we're diving into the vibrant world of web design. It's time to move beyond black and white. Let's add some color to the text. Have you ever looked at a website and wondered how it gets those eye-catching colors and cool designs? Well, today is the day you go from a builder to an artist. We aren't just looking at plain lines of text anymore. Now take a look at this code. What you're seeing here is a basic HTML structure that creates a simple web page. We start with the body tag. This is where all the visible content of your web page lives. Think of it like the main stage where everything appears. Inside the body, we have a div tag. This is like a container or box that helps us organize content neatly. Now comes the star of the show, the H1 heading tag. Here we've written tourism, which becomes the main heading of our web page. By default, H1 tag gives you a big, bold title, perfect for grabbing attention. Right below that we have a P paragraph tag, which stands for paragraph. Inside it we added a line. Plan your trip wherever you want to go. This is your description text, giving users more context. And finally we have a button tag, Get Started. This is where users can interact with your web page. Buttons are super important for actions like sign up, navigation, or starting a journey. Now one important thing to notice here is indentation. Proper spacing makes your code clean, readable, and professional, just like good handwriting. So overall, this simple structure builds a clean web page with a heading, description, and a button, a perfect starting point for any website. All right, now let's level up. We've created our HTML, but it looks plain, right? That's where CSS comes in. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it's used to style and design your web page. Here, we are applying color to our main heading using CSS. Let's break it down step by step. First, we have the selector .main heading. This tells the browser, hey, apply these styles to all elements with this class name. Next comes the property color. This defines what you want to change. And then the value blues. This defines how you want it to look. So when we write color blue, we are telling the browser to make the text color blue. Simple formula to remember. Select a property and value. Also notice the syntax. Curly braces, hold the styles, semicolon, ends each rule. With just one line of CSS, we transformed our boring heading into something visually appealing. And this is just the beginning. Imagine what you can do with fonts, layouts, animations, and more. Now comes the magic moment. Let's understand how HTML and CSS work together. HTML gives structure. CSS gives style. Together, they create beautiful websites. Here, we are connecting them using something called a class. In HTML, we use an attribute called class. For example, class equal to main heading. This acts like a label or name that we assign to an element. Now in CSS, we use that same name but with a dot. Dot main heading. This is how CSS identifies which element to style. Think of it like this. HTML says, this is my name. CSS says, okay, I'll style you. So, attribute name equal to class. Attribute value equal to main heading. This connection allows CSS to target specific elements without affecting others. This is extremely powerful because you can reuse the same class across multiple elements and apply consistent styling everywhere. Now let's see it in action. Here we have our HTML code again, but this time we've added something important. Look closely at the h1 tag. Class equal to main heading. This means we are assigning a class to this heading. Now remember what we learned earlier, CSS uses this class to apply styles. So somewhere in our CSS we write .main heading in curly braces color blue, and instantly, boom, our tourism heading turns blue. This is how HTML and CSS communicate and work together. Key takeaway: HTML equal to defines content, CSS equal to defines appearance, and the class attribute is the bridge between them. This method keeps your code clean, reusable, and scalable, especially when building large websites. And here we go. This is the final result of combining HTML and CSS. Look at that beautiful heading, tourism, now styled in a clean blue color. What started as plain text has now become visually attractive, all thanks to CSS. Notice how styling improves. Readability, user experience, overall design. This is just a simple example, but imagine applying different fonts, background colors, animations, layout designs. You can build stunning websites. Remember, every great website you see on the internet is built using this same concept. HTML plus CSS working together. So keep practicing, keep experimenting, and soon you'll be building your own amazing web pages. In this example, we are applying color directly to a heading using something called the style attribute. Inside the h1 tag, you can see this code, style equals to color blue. So what does this mean? It means we are telling the browser, hey, display this heading text in blue color. The word tourism here becomes blue instantly. That's the magic of inline styling. Let's break it down. H1 is the heading tag. Style is an attribute. Color is the property. Blue is the value. So simple, right? But remember, this method is great for small changes, not for big projects. Still, it's a great way to quickly style your content and see instant results. All right, let's level up a bit and understand how CSS works with paragraphs. Here, we are using something called a CSS selector. The selector.paragraph targets all elements that have the class name paragraph. Now look at this line color, gray. This is where the styling magic happens. Let's break it down clearly. Selector means targets the element. Property means what you want to change color. Value means how you want it to look gray. So basically, we are telling the browser, make all paragraph elements with this class appear in gray color. This approach is much cleaner and reusable compared to inline HTML styling. And guess what? This is how real-world websites are styled. Now things are getting exciting. Let's see how HTML and CSS work together like a perfect team. In this example, we use something called a class attribute. Inside the paragraph tag, we write class equals to my paragraph. This is like giving a name or label to that paragraph. Now in CSS, we can use this class name to apply styles. So what's happening here? Attribute name equals to class. Attribute value equals to my paragraph. This connects HTML with CSS. This method helps us apply the same style to multiple elements easily. Clean, efficient, and super powerful. Let's see a real example of how everything connects. Here we have a paragraph tag with a class name called paragraph. Inside this paragraph, we have some text about planning a trip. Now because we added this class, we can style it using CSS. This means we don't need to write styles again and again. We just define it once and reuse it everywhere. This is how professional developers write clean and organized code. It saves time, reduces errors, and makes your website look consistent. So remember, class is the bridge between HTML and CSS. Right now, most web pages start with a plain white background, but using CSS, we can easily change that and make our design look more beautiful and engaging. Think of background color like painting a wall. It helps highlight your content and improves user experience. So let's get started and bring some color into our web page. Now let's understand the syntax to add a background color using CSS. Here we are targeting a class called card. Inside the curly brackets, we use the property called background color. Then we assign it a value, in this case, light blue. So the code looks like this. .card open curly brace background color, light blue close curly brace. This means every element with the class card will have a light blue background. Simple, right? CSS always follows this pattern. Select the element, then apply the style. Now let's look at the HTML structure where we apply this style. Here we have a div element with a class name card. Inside the div we have a heading, a paragraph and a button. The heading says tourism, followed by some descriptive text, and a get started button. This div acts like a container that holds all our content. By giving it a class name, we can easily target it in CSS and apply styles like background color, padding and more. And here comes the final result. Now you can see the paragraph beautifully styled with color and design. As you can see, the entire container now has a beautiful light blue background. This makes the content stand out clearly and look more attractive. The heading, text and button are now easier to read and visually appealing. This is how a simple CSS property can completely change the look of your web page. This is all done using CSS connected through the class we defined earlier. This is the power of combining HTML and CSS. Without CSS, websites would look plain and boring. But with CSS, they come alive. You can experiment with different colors to match your design style. So what did we learn today? Let's quickly revise what we learned in this lesson. First, we understood CSS properties. These are used to style HTML elements. Then, we looked at text styling using properties like color. Finally, we learned about background styling using background color. Remember, HTML creates the structure and CSS adds the style. When both are used together, we can build beautiful and professional web pages. Keep practicing and try different colors on your own to improve your skills. And here's what's coming up next. In the next lesson, we'll learn how to use a separate class to design and style a button beautifully using CSS. As you can see, this Get Started button is not just a simple button, it's styled to look clean, modern and attractive. We'll understand how to create this kind of button step by step, making your website more interactive and user-friendly. So get ready to level up your design skills. Keep practicing, keep experimenting, and soon you'll be building amazing websites.